these are the ones that you're going to spend the most time in. So audience for me, I just ask myself the question of who is coming to my website. So any sort of like demographics that you want to know about the actual person, the actual users coming to your website, you'll find under here. Acquisition tells us how they found your website. So what did they use to eventually end up at your website? So did they come through from Facebook, or did they come through from Google, or did they come through from an email newsletter? You'll find that under acquisition. And as you can imagine, as marketers, we spend a lot of time in that. Behavior tells us what happened. So in other words, now that they're on your website, what did they do? What pages did they look at? Which are the pages that they exited on? So we get a lot of insight into the what behavior. And conversions is essentially just that. So this tells us exactly how they've converted on your website, what type of conversions happened. Were they phone calls? Were they emails? Were they forms? And you can even start getting a little complex and taking a look at, did the person come to your website on a few occasions before they converted? So we can get quite technical into conversions, but we'll just go through the basics today. So let's start with the audience. Now, as you can imagine, this is super overwhelming. Like, there's loads of different reports here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the ones that are the most important. A lot of these things are new features that Google Analytics is constantly sort of rolling out. And unfortunately, it generally takes a lot of data for these ones to really kind of show their worth. So I'm going to rather utilize the ones that's applicable for you and me. The first place I like to go down to is the demographics, and what you can see here is there's age and gender. So Google Analytics takes a look at your users and it takes a look at their behavior, and with that it essentially comes up with an assumption of what that person's age and gender is. It's actually quite a cool trick on Google where you can go take a look at what Google thinks or you are and see if they actually get it right. So over here, what we want to do is just make sure our date range is whatever we would like it to be. So I'm going to say from Jan. Let's take a look what happened. And we're looking at all the users. We're not going to go into things such as filters right now. We're going to keep it simple. And then you can just take a look down here. So it's essentially exactly what it's saying here. It breaks down the different age groups that have come to your website. And then you'll find that the different columns that it has here are generally the same for all of the different reports. So we'll just run through it once. So users is the amount of people that came to your website. New users would be the amount of people that come into the website for the first time. Sessions is how many times people came to your website. So for example, I can have 195 users that come to the site, but maybe some of them came back twice in that particular date range. So that's why we always have more sessions than users. Bounce rate is always an interesting subject. So this is how many people have come to your website and they left your website without navigating to another page. So essentially, they're known as somebody who bounced. Now, a question we get a lot is like, what is a good bounce rate? And I think you have to kind of benchmark this against yourself. So for example, if you just have a one-pager website, like the landing pages that we were chatting about earlier, there is no place for the person to navigate. So we expect that to have an exceptionally high bounce rate. But if, let's say, you have an e-commerce store where people can go and take a look at loads of different products, that would be really different. And we wouldn't want a high bounce rate for something like that. This particular site of mine, it only has about 5 pages on. So I don't expect them to be or people to be spending loads of times on there. So that's the bounce rate of it, and then it's broken it up into the different ages. Pages per session, so how many pages on average did people go to? How much time did they spend on the website? And then looking at the goals. So let's rather go to all goals. And this would be, you can actually go down to all the individual goals that you've set up. I'm just going to take a look at in total what actually happened. So we can take a look here, and currently what this is telling me is out of all the people that came to the website, how many of them converted, and then it comes up with a conversion rate for me. So we can see right now that if I just click on this, it would actually sort it in order from high to low. And if I look at that, it's telling me right now that 45 to 54-year-olds have converted the best on my website, and then how many actual conversions happen. Goal value is if you decided that a lead is worth something to you. So you could actually assign a value to it. So again, it's a little bit more complex, and I wouldn't really worry about it just for our beginners lesson for Google Analytics. So those are all the columns, and as I said, in a moment you'll notice, like even if we go down to gender, it is essentially pulling the same columns through, except now just your primary dimension over here has just changed to, in this case, gender. So again, taking a look at this, we can see that females have got a much higher conversion rate on the website than males. And what you would start to do is you'd start to analyze this kind of information, and it gives you insights into where you should be targeting. So maybe you want to sponsor an event and you go, okay, well, I don't really know which event I should be sponsoring. You go over here and you take a look, oh, wow, females seem to sort of like my service, my product a lot more than male. Then maybe look at female-based type events. So this is where you can start really making some great decisions. The interests just tell you a little bit more about your audience in regards to what other types of sites they've been going to. And the one that I like the most is the one called in-market segments, because these are people that aren't just showing a particular interest, but they're actually showing that they're in buying mode. So they're doing inquiries into different types of products or services. So if we go down here quickly, can see like what are the types of websites people are going to, and we normally always see certain ones that stand out, and so you just be careful of that, is that there'll always be certain ones that come up. We always see employment, we always see travel, and we generally also see anything to do with property or cars. So I think just when you're making decisions, just rather eliminate those ones and then see if there's anything else that sort of stands out that's maybe a little bit different. So if I go through this, business services, advertising, marketing services, so I know that's great. This is the right type of person coming to my site because we are an advertising company. So this shows that they are in the market for advertising companies, which means they've been doing their research and going to a few others. The geo section I really like, and we generally use just the location part of it. Language is more if you had to do global campaigns and you want to know like how many German-speaking people or Dutch people are coming to the site, and maybe you need to know if you need to have advertising in those languages, then you can go take a look at that. However, if I just take a look at this, location, so as expected, South Africa is number 1, but we can get a little bit more granular here. So if you actually click on the country itself, it will break it down a little bit further. So from here we can see we definitely have a much bigger conversion rate in the Western Cape, and most likely because we are based in the Western Cape. What you could do as well is over here at the top where it says primary dimension, you can even get a little bit smaller and click into city. And now we start seeing which actual cities are they coming from. So again, as you can imagine, helps you make decisions. You know, should you be opening up maybe a new dealership in a different city, or starting a strategic partnership elsewhere? This can give you an indication of where to be putting your focus. So just to confuse things a little bit, you've got the word behavior here and down there, but this is your essentially the user's behavior. So again, I'm still telling you about who is coming to your website. And the primary thing I'm going to concentrate on here is the new versus returning. So if you go into that, it's actually one of my favorite reports. It tells us how many people are coming to the website for the first time and how many have returned to the website. So it could be the second, third, 11th time. It doesn't really matter. They'll be stuck in over here. And what we normally notice is the conversion rates are very different from a new to a returning visitor. So in my particular case, it's gone against what I've said with it being very similar. But generally, we would find a returning user to be more than double in conversion rate compared to a new visitor. So again, taking a look at this can really help you make decisions maybe around whether you want to run a remarketing campaign and target people that have come to your website before, as an example. The next two reports, you're more than welcome to go into it. We're not going to go into it now, but basically it just takes this data and gives you a little bit more detail about it. Technology is something I don't utilize too often. However, where it could be useful for you is, let's say if you had to go to the browser OS side, maybe your website you found is not running nicely on Internet Explorer. So now you're trying to think to yourself, whoa, do I need to go through the extra expense of trying to fix this website to run on Internet Explorer? You could take a look here, like I've done, and I see Internet Explorer in the last few months, I've only had 7 visitors from it. And then I need to ask myself whether that is something I'm willing to invest in or if I'm actually willing to let it go. And you could even go into it further, and maybe it's only a certain version of Internet Explorer that's not working. So let's, for example, say it was Internet Explorer 8 that you're having a problem with. Go into it and go, oh wow, that's actually only 3 visitors out of the 600 that have been to my site. And I might look at that and go, okay, it's actually not worth that extra expense to me. Another one of my favorite reports is the mobile report. Going into that, it basically gives you a breakdown of the different types of device categories that you get. So desktop would be laptops as well as sort of standalone computers. Mobile would be any sort of mobile telephone device, and a tablet is exactly what it says it is. So what we've noticed a lot of our clients is that mobile is just really taken over. I mean, this is crazy, the fact that we're seeing more desktop traffic than mobile traffic. Sometimes because we are B2B, you might see that, but actually even in our other clients B2B, we're seeing mobile sitting at sort of 70% of the traffic and up. And that is something to really take into account when designing your website, making sure it works really well on a mobile device. The other thing just to be careful of here is you'll notice that mobile stats and desktop stats are a bit different. And generally what will happen is the mobile stats will look worse than the desktop stats. Now, I don't think you have to be too stressed out about that. We do expect it to be worse, but I think it's just the amount of degree of how much worse it is. So we always say if it's sort of within that 75% threshold, we're really, really happy. So if if let's say the desktop bounce rate was 50%, then 75% of worse would maybe be, let's call it 40%. Don't have my calculator out right now. And we'd be like, okay, if that's within 40%, then we're happy. So just take a look at that threshold. With goal completions, we normally find that mobile is a lot less than desktop. But again, it just really depends on your service, and you'll have to look at your own type of offerings that you have. So for example, people might not like to buy online using their mobile device. Then you will see it being a lot lower than desktop. However, just to remember that sometimes people will start out their journey on their mobile device, but then they will complete the transaction on the desktop. So please don't think that you must disregard it just because the stats are lower. If you wanted to get a little bit more granular, you could click into devices, and then it actually takes a look and breaks down all the different devices and how those are converting on your site. So if I wanted to maybe just sort this out here, and see, okay, here's my one conversion that came through, and I can see exactly the phone that it has come through on. This is obviously quite granular, so if you want the primary dimension, you can just go to branding, and then it will put all of that information in one. So let's just go back to sorting it by users. So I can see Samsung has given me the most users, followed by Apple, and so we can carry on all the way down. The other thing I just actually want to point out is this amount of the bracket. This is the percentage of the total. So 34 people out of the total 113 are from Samsung. So otherwise known as 30% of the users are from Samsung. Those are the main things that we're going to go through from an audience perspective. The rest, as I said, you're more than welcome to play with, but the ones that we've gone through are definitely the ones that will be the most important to you for now and will really help you identify who your perfect target market is and help you hopefully make those business and those marketing decisions. In a moment, in our next video, we'll go through the acquisition side.